In orbit around Earth, the Missouri floated in its new berth, its battle damage already under repair. The mighty battleship had earned a place of honor, visible from the surface as a reminder of how humanity's past had secured its future. Tourist ships circled it daily, their passengers marveling at how a vessel designed for Earth's oceans had helped win a battle in space. The Empire's defeat has changed the galaxy's perception of Earth, Jin Ho told the Council. They expected to find a primitive civilization barely capable of spaceflight. Instead, they found one that had preserved its entire military history and found ways to make it relevant to modern warfare. Lena stood at a window, watching the Missouri catch the sunlight. "We should remember this lesson," she said softly. "Our history isn't just something to preserve in museums. It's a source of strength, experience, and innovation that we can draw upon to face new challenges." In the Kuiper Belt Museum, the new wing was nearing completion. School groups would soon walk its halls, learning how humanity had taken its naval heritage to the stars. They would see how wooden ships, steel battleships, and ancient aircraft had been given new life in space, proving that the human spirit of innovation knew no bounds. As Han Bin made his final inspection of the exhibits, he paused at a simple display near the entrance. It showed a quote that had been found carved into the Missouri's bridge after the battle. "The future belongs to those who honor their past." The Empire had learned this lesson the hard way. They had come expecting to find a civilization ready to submit to superior technology. Instead, they found one that had turned its history into a weapon more powerful than any advanced technology. As humanity looked to the stars, it carried with it not just dreams of the future, but the strength and wisdom of its past. As Jin Ho left the council chamber, his wrist panel beeped. It was a message from the secret shipyards in the Kuiper Belt. The restoration teams were ready to begin the final modifications. Soon, the Empire would learn that demanding tribute from humanity had been their greatest mistake. A slight smile played across Jin Ho's face as he thought about the Empire's reaction when they saw Earth's response. They expected submission or a futile resistance with modern weapons. Instead, they would face the combined naval might of every era of human history and learn why challenging humanity was never a wise choice. The next few days would be crucial. There was much to prepare and very little time to do it. But as Jin Ho looked up at the night sky, where the Imperial fleet waited unseen beyond Earth's atmosphere, he felt a surge of confidence. The Empire thought they were dealing with a simple, outmatched civilization. They were about to learn just how wrong they were. Deep in the Kuiper Belt, Curator Han Bin guided the council members through the massive space dock. Ancient vessels floated in perfect preservation, their hulls gleaming under artificial stars. From wooden ships of the line to massive steel battleships, humanity's naval history hung suspended in the void. The council members pressed their faces against the viewport windows like children at a museum. Before them stretched humanity's greatest secret, a collection of warships spanning 5 centuries of naval warfare, each one maintained as if it had just left the shipyard. The space dock itself was a marvel of engineering, stretching for kilometers in every direction, with specialized bays designed to house vessels from every era. Every ship, Han Bin explained proudly, maintained in working order. "We've preserved them all, from the smallest patrol boat to the mightiest battleship. It started as a historical project, but now they might be our salvation." Lena finished, watching a restored aircraft carrier drift past their viewport. The massive vessel, once confined to Earth's oceans, now floated gracefully in space, its flight deck modified to handle both traditional aircraft and modern spacecraft. Han Bin led them through a series of pressurized walkways, each offering a different view of the collection. They passed by a section housing World War II vessels, destroyers, cruisers, and submarines floating in formation as if ready for battle. The metal hulls had been reinforced with modern alloys, but their original lines remained unchanged. "How many ships do we have in total?" Chief Counselor Park asked, his voice filled with wonder. "Over 3,000 combat-ready vessels," Han Bin replied. We started the preservation program shortly after achieving spaceflight. While the public thought we were simply building museums, we were actually creating the largest fleet in human history. They stopped at a viewing platform overlooking a section of wooden ships. The sight was breathtaking. Ancient vessels of the line, their wooden hulls treated with space-age polymers, their sails replaced with solar collectors that resembled traditional canvas. Gunports lined their sides, but now housed a mixture of traditional cannons and modern energy weapons. The Empire won't know what to make of these, Admiral Jinho said, pointing to a massive Spanish galleon. Their sensors will register the wood, the basic construction materials. They'll think we're sending museum pieces into battle. Which is exactly what we're doing, Han Bin said with a smile. But these museum pieces have teeth. We've maintained all the original weapon systems while adding modern improvements. That galleon can still fire a traditional broadside, but now its cannons are loaded with plasma shells instead of iron balls. The tour continued to a section housing submarines from various eras. Each one had been modified for space operations while retaining their original stealth capabilities. The Empire has no defense against old-style torpedo attacks, Jinho explained. Their shields are designed to stop energy weapons, not physical projectiles moving through space. Lena stopped at a window overlooking a massive battleship. Is that the Yamato? She asked, recognizing the distinctive profile of the Japanese super battleship. Yes, Han Bin confirmed. We recovered her from the ocean floor decades ago. Now her 18-inch guns have been modified to fire antimatter shells. The Empire won't expect that kind of firepower from what they'll consider a primitive vessel. The group moved to a central control room, where technicians monitored the status of every ship in the fleet. Screens showed crews training, engineers making final modifications, and weapons being tested in specialized ranges deep in space. The preservation isn't just about the ships, Han Bin explained. We've maintained all the original documentation, training manuals, and tactical guides. Our crews are trained in both modern space warfare and historical naval combat. They can fight these ships exactly as they were fought centuries ago, but with the addition of modern technology. Admiral Jinho turned to the council members. What you're seeing here is humanity's greatest advantage. The Empire expects us to fight like a young spacefaring race. Instead, we'll show them 500 years of naval combat experience, updated for the space age. As they prepared to leave, Han Bin led them to one final viewport. Before them floated the U.S. Missouri, the mighty battleship where World War II had officially ended. Her hull now bristled with a mixture of original guns and modern weapons, a perfect symbol of this unique fleet. When does the Empire expect our answer? Han Bin asked. 5 days, Jinho replied. More than enough time to mobilize the fleet. They're expecting tribute ships laden with Earth's resources. Instead, they'll get the combined naval might of human history. As the council members boarded their transport back to Earth, Lena took one last look at the assembled fleet. These ships, preserved as a testament to human history, were about to write a new chapter in humanity's story. The Empire thought they were dealing with a simple planetary civilization. They were about to learn that humanity's past was just as dangerous as its present. Chief Engineer Sunmai wiped grease from her hands as she supervised the installation of shield generators into the U.S. Missouri's hull. Around her, hundreds of engineers and historians worked together, transforming museum pieces into weapons of war. The massive battleship floated in its maintenance dock, surrounded by work crews in spacesuits. Sparks flew as they carefully integrated modern technology into the historic vessel. The ship's original gray paint gleamed under the work lights, its massive gun turrets still as imposing as they had been centuries ago. The Empire expects energy weapons and modern tactics, she explained to Admiral Jinho, who had come to check on their progress. They've never seen a 16-inch naval gun modified to fire plasma shells. We're keeping the original firing mechanisms, just upgrading what they deliver. Nearby, Captain Kita drilled his crew in operating the hybrid systems. Ancient wheel and modern holographic controls worked in perfect harmony. The bridge of the Missouri was a unique blend of old and new brass fittings and steel wheels, alongside holographic displays and quantum computers. Sun Mi led Jin-Ho through the battleship's corridors. Engineers were everywhere, carefully running power conduits alongside the original steam pipes. The biggest challenge, she explained, was integrating the shield generators without compromising the ship's original structure. We wanted to keep as much of her historical integrity as possible. They stopped at one of the main gun turrets. Inside, crews were modifying the massive guns while maintaining their original loading mechanisms. "Watch this," Sun Mi said proudly, activating a test sequence. The ancient hydraulics whirred to life, moving the giant barrel with the same precision it had shown in World War I. But now, modern targeting systems helped guide its aim, and the shells it would fire were far more devastating than anything its original designers had imagined. "How are the crews adapting?" Jin-Ho asked, watching a team practice loading procedures that combined centuries-old techniques with new technology. "Better than expected," Ki-tae answered, joining them at the turret. Many of them are military history enthusiasts. They understand both the old and new systems. It's like they've been preparing for this their whole lives. The tour continued to the engine room, where the biggest changes were visible. The original boilers had been replaced with fusion reactors, though the massive steam turbines remained, now powered by the heat of artificial stars rather than burning oil. "We've kept the original propulsion concept," Sun Mi explained. "The Empire's sensors will detect steam power and assume we're completely primitive. They won't realize our steam is generated by fusion reactors hot enough to match a sun." Throughout the ship, similar transformations were taking place. The Combat Information Center still had its original plotting tables, but now they displayed holographic battle maps. The radar room contained both vintage scanning equipment and quantum sensors that could detect ships light years away. "The best part," Kita said with a smile, "is that we can switch between old and new systems instantly. If the Empire manages to disable our modern technology, we can still fight using the original systems. They'll never expect that." In the mess hall, now equipped with both traditional tables and modern food synthesizers, crews studied battle tactics from both centuries past and the modern era. They learned to combine old naval warfare techniques with space combat maneuvers in ways that had never been attempted before. "We've run simulations," Sun Mi told Jin-Ho. "The Empire's combat computers are programmed to counter modern weapons and tactics. They have no protocols for dealing with a battleship that can fight like it's 1945 one moment, and then switch to 25th century combat the next." As they completed their inspection, they stepped onto the Missouri's deck, protected from space by modern force fields that shimmered like heat waves above water. The massive guns pointed out into the void, ready to fire shells that combine nuclear warheads with plasma containment fields. "Will she be ready in time?" Jin-Ho asked, looking at his old friend with concern. Sun Mi nodded confidently. "The Missouri will lead the fleet, just as she's done before. The Empire thinks they're facing a primitive civilization. Instead, they'll face the combined ingenuity of centuries of human warfare, updated for the space age." As the Admiral prepared to leave, Sun Mi grabbed his arm. "Tell the Council not to worry. These ships helped us win our greatest wars on Earth. Now they'll help us win our first major war in space. The Empire has no idea what they're about to face." Above them, crews continued their work, preparing the mighty battleship for one more fight. The Missouri had been present at the end of humanity's greatest conflict. Now, centuries later, she would help prevent humanity from becoming slaves to an alien empire. The old ship seemed to understand her role, her steel hull gleaming proudly under the stars. In the shadow of Saturn, Commander Minwoo watched from the bridge of his Spanish galleon as Imperial scout ships approached. The wooden ship's sails had been replaced with solar collectors, but its proud lines remained unchanged. The Santa Maria II, as she had been christened, floated silently among Saturn's rings, her wooden hull treated with space-age polymers that gave it the same rich, deep color it would have had centuries ago on Earth's oceans. The bridge crew worked quietly at their stations, an odd mix of period-accurate wheels and levers alongside holographic displays. Through the reinforced glass windows, designed to look like the original ship's windows, but capable of withstanding space combat, Minwu could see 3 Imperial scout ships approaching. "Look at those fools," the Imperial commander's transmission crackled. "They've sent primitive vessels. This will be over quick." The transmission cut off as the galleon's broadside of plasma-enhanced cannons tore through the scout ship shields. The Imperial vessel erupted in a brilliant flash, its remnants scattering across space like modern flotsam and jetsam. "Reload all cannons," Minwu ordered, his voice calm despite the excitement coursing through him. The crew worked with practiced efficiency, loading the ancient-looking cannons with modern plasma shells. The sound of wooden wheels on wooden decks mixed with the hum of power conduits. The remaining 2 Imperial ships hesitated, their sensors no doubt struggling to understand what had just happened. They had approached expecting to find primitive wooden vessels, easy targets to destroy as a show of force. Instead, they found themselves facing weapons they couldn't comprehend. "Enemy vessels are charging weapons," reported the sensor officer, her hands moving between an old brass telescope and a quantum scanning display. "They're trying to target our power systems, sir." Minwu smiled. "They won't find any. Not where they're looking." The Santa Maria Pu's power core was disguised as the ship's original hold, hidden beneath layers of wood and modern stealth materials. The Empire's sensors would only see what appeared to be an empty cargo space. "Hard to starboard," Minwu commanded. The helmsman spun the great wooden wheel, and the galleon turned with a grace that would have impressed the ancient sailors who had inspired her design. Modern thrusters, disguised as wooden decorations along the hull, provided the actual propulsion. The Imperial ships opened fire, their energy weapons slicing through space where the galleon had been moments before. Minwu waited until they had committed to their attack run, then gave the order he'd been waiting to use since taking command. "Prepare for broadside. Gun crews at the ready." The port side gun ports opened, revealing rows of cannons that looked like they belonged in a museum. The gun crews worked their ancient mechanisms, aided by targeting computers hidden within the wooden gun carriages. "Fire as she bears." The broadside crashed out, 30 cannons firing in perfect sequence. Instead of iron balls, they launched plasma-contained antimatter charges. The first Imperial ship shields flared and died under the assault, its hull cracking open like an egg. The second managed to raise additional shields, but the unusual attack pattern confused its defensive computers. "They're calling for reinforcements," the communications officer reported, her modern headset incongruous against her period-accurate uniform. The Imperial commander sounds confused. "I imagine he is," Minwu replied. "Reload and prepare for another pass. Let's show them what this old girl can do." As the gun crews worked, Minwu watched the remaining Imperial ship trying to maneuver into a better position. Its crew was probably trained to deal with modern space combat, with its energy weapons and missile salvos. They had no doctrine for dealing with broadside attacks from what appeared to be a wooden sailing ship. "Sir, Imperial reinforcements are arriving," the sensor officer called out. 5 vessels, heavy cruiser class." Minwu touched a hidden control panel, disguised as an old map case. "Time to show them our other surprises. Signal the fleet. Execute pattern Nelson." From their hiding places among Saturn's rings, other ships of humanity's historical fleet emerged. A World War II destroyer group appeared from behind one of the larger ring fragments. A squadron of ancient submarines, their hulls modified for space combat, decloaked near the Imperial formation. And from the shadow of Titan, a flight of Spitfire fighters launched, their propellers replaced with ion drives, but their forms still unmistakably those of Earth's most famous fighter aircraft. The Imperial reinforcements hesitated, their sensors no doubt giving them impossible readings. Here were vessels that shouldn't be able to function in space, using weapons that shouldn't exist, executing battle tactics from centuries before humanity had achieved spaceflight. All batteries, fire at will, Minmu commanded. The Santa Maria Fuse guns roared again, joined by the modern enhanced weapons of humanity's preserved fleet. The space around Saturn lit up with the combined fury of centuries of naval warfare, adapted for this new battlefield. As the battle began in earnest, Minmu allowed himself a small smile. The Empire had expected to find a primitive civilization ready to submit to their demands. Instead, they found themselves facing the combined naval heritage of humanity, enhanced by modern technology, but fighting with the tactics and courage that had won wars throughout Earth's history. The Santa Maria II turned for another pass, her wooden hull gleaming in the light of Saturn's rings, ready to show the galaxy that humanity's past was just as dangerous as its present. Admiral Jin-Ho coordinated from the Missouri as hundreds of historical vessels emerged from hiding. The massive battleship's bridge hummed with activity as crew members worked at stations that blended World War II equipment with modern technology. Through the armored windows, he watched as World War II submarines performed FTL jumps behind Imperial cruisers. Ancient destroyers launched salvos that confused Imperial targeting systems. "They can't adapt," Captain Yonghe reported from her British frigate. "Their combat computers are trying to apply standard tactics to ships that shouldn't even exist." Her vessel, HMS Warrior, was exchanging fire with an Imperial cruiser, its wooden sides somehow withstanding energy weapons that should have vaporized them instantly. The Empire's neat formations broke apart as they faced weapons and strategies their advanced systems had never encountered. Their mighty ships, each the size of a small city, found themselves surrounded by vessels their sensors classified as harmless antiques. U.S. Enterprise Group, commence attack pattern 3, Jin-Ho ordered. The ancient aircraft carrier, now modified for space combat, launched waves of fighters. World War II Corsairs and Hellcats, their engines replaced with ion drives, but their forms unchanged, swarmed around the Imperial capital ships like angry wasps. From his tactical display, Jin-Ho watched as German U-boats, their hulls now capable of FTL travel, emerged from hyperspace inside the Empire's formation. They launched torpedoes modified with antimatter warheads, their ancient targeting systems proving more effective than modern ones because they relied on human intuition rather than predictable computer algorithms. Missouri actual to all ships, Jin-Ho broadcast. Commence Operation Crossroads. It was a fitting name, taken from the nuclear tests that had once demonstrated the power of atomic weapons. Now it would show the Empire the full might of Earth's preserved fleet. The Missouri's main batteries elevated, their massive barrels tracking Imperial targets. "All guns, fire as she bears," Jin-Ho commanded. The ship shuddered as her 16-inch guns roared, launching shells that combined conventional explosives with plasma containment fields. The Imperial ship's shields, designed to stop energy weapons, proved surprisingly vulnerable to these hybrid attacks. "Sir, enemy fleet is trying to regroup," his tactical officer reported. "They're falling back to standard defensive formations." Jin-Ho smiled. "Exactly as expected. Signal the submarine wolf packs. Execute pattern dunnets." Across the battlefield, more submarines emerged from FTL jumps. They had been waiting for this moment, using tactics developed by German Admiral Karl Dönitz in World War II, but now applied to three-dimensional space combat. The Imperial ships, trying to maintain their tight formation, made perfect targets. "Report from HMS Victory," his communications officer called out. "Captain Park says their broadside tactics are working. Imperial shields can't adapt to simultaneous impact from multiple solid projectiles." The Victory, Nelson's flagship from the Battle of Trafalgar, was proving particularly effective. Its wooden construction confused Imperial targeting systems, while its broadside of gravity-accelerated cannonballs, enhanced with modern warheads, tore through ships that should have been far beyond its capability to harm. "Sir, Imperial command ship is launching fighters," the radar operator reported. The Empire's sleek, modern craft emerged from their hangars, only to find themselves engaged by aircraft from 3 centuries of warfare. Spitfires and Zeros, Space Corsairs and Wildcats, all modified for space, but retaining their original maneuverability and piloting requirements. Jin-Ho watched as an Imperial cruiser, its shields failing under repeated attacks from weapons its designers had never imagined, tried to target the Missouri. The battleship's original armor, enhanced with modern materials but still fundamentally the same steel that had shrugged off kamikaze attacks, absorbed the energy blasts with surprising effectiveness. All batteries, target that cruiser, he ordered. The Missouri's 9 16-inch guns spoke as one, their shells carrying enough force to crack the Imperial vessel's hull. Modern weapons followed through the breach, and the mighty ship began to break apart. "Sir, enemy fleet is showing signs of confusion," his tactical officer reported with satisfaction. "Their combat computers are trying to find patterns in our attacks, but each ship is fighting according to its own historical doctrine." That was the true genius of their strategy. The Empire relied on predictable, computer-controlled combat patterns, but they were facing ships from every era of human naval warfare, each fighting according to the tactics that had made them effective in their own time. There was no pattern for their computers to detect, no standard response they could formulate. The Missouri shuddered as an Imperial blast struck her port side. Damage control teams, trained in both modern and historical repair techniques, rushed to contain the damage. The old ship proved as resilient as ever, her combination of old and new technology making her nearly impossible to disable completely. "Signal from Captain Yonga," the communications officer reported. "HMS Warrior has successfully disabled their target. She's moving to support the submarine group." Jin-Ho nodded with satisfaction. The battle was far from over, but its outcome was becoming clear. The Empire had expected to face a primitive civilization armed with a few modern weapons. Instead, they found themselves fighting the combined naval experience of human history, enhanced by modern technology, but retaining all the qualities that had made these ships legendary in their own times. The Missouri's guns thundered again, and Jin-Ho allowed himself a small smile. Humanity's past was proving more than a match for the Empire's present. These ships, preserved as museums but maintained ready for war, were writing a new chapter in naval history, one that would be remembered as long as humans sailed the seas of space. Commander Sunmi's carrier group struck from the dark side of Jupiter, launching fighters that combined propeller engines with energy shields. The Empire's fleet scattered, unable to counter attacks coming from vessels their sensors classified as non-threats. The massive gas giant's radiation belts helped mask her approach, just as cloud cover had once hidden aircraft carriers on Earth's oceans. From the bridge of the U.S. Enterprise, Sunmi watched as her first wave of fighters emerged from the launch tubes. The sight was extraordinary. World War II aircraft, their shapes unchanged but their systems enhanced with modern technology, streaking across space with their propellers spinning inside energy fields that let them maneuver as if they were still in atmosphere. "Wildcats and Hellcats, form up on Attack Vector 3, she ordered. The fighters moved into their combat formations, just as they had over the Pacific nearly 3 centuries ago. Corsair groups, prepare for attack run on their capital ships. The Empire's fleet was already in disarray from battles with other elements of Earth's historical fleet. Their neat formations had been broken by broadsides from wooden ships of the line and torpedo attacks from submarines. Now they faced another weapon they hadn't expected, carrier-based aircraft that their sensors couldn't properly track. "First wave, engage at will," Sunmi commanded. The fighters dove into battle, their ancient guns now firing plasma bolts while their wings carried modern missiles alongside replicas of their original weapons. Imperial point defense systems, programmed to track and destroy modern spacecraft, struggled to lock onto targets that moved like atmospheric aircraft. In the chaos, Admiral Jin-Ho ordered the final push. The Missouri's main batteries thundered, ancient gunpowder and modern plasma combining to tear through Imperial shields. The massive battleship led a formation of vessels from every era of naval warfare. World War II destroyers, Age of Sail frigates, Cold War cruisers, all modified for space, but fighting with their original tactics. Enemy flagship detected. Sun Mi's tactical officer reported. They're trying to coordinate a counterattack. Sun Mi smiled. Launch second wave. Target their command and control systems. More fighters streamed from Enterprise's launch tubes, joining the battle that now raged across the space near Jupiter. The Empire's superior technology proved surprisingly vulnerable to attacks it hadn't been designed to counter. High Lord Ko's flagship turned to retreat, followed by the remnants of his once proud fleet. The massive vessel, large enough to house a small city, found itself harried by fighters that should have been museum pieces. Its shields flickered under the combined assault of historical weapons enhanced by modern science. All carriers, launch remaining fighters, Sun Mi ordered. Don't let them regroup. The Enterprise was joined by other carriers, the Yorktown, the Akagi, the Ark Royal, each sending waves of fighters into the battle. The space around Jupiter filled with combat aircraft from every nation that had ever launched planes from a carrier's deck. From her command station, Sun Mi watched as a squadron of Hellcats caught an Imperial cruiser trying to escape. The ancient fighters, piloted by crews trained in both historical and modern combat techniques, executed an attack run that could have come straight from the Battle of Midway. Their weapons, however, were far more devastating than anything their original designers had imagined. Enemy fleet is in full retreat, her tactical officer reported with barely contained excitement. Their formation is completely broken. The Empire's mighty ships, each one a testament to advanced technology, were being driven back by vessels they had dismissed as primitive. Their combat computers, programmed to counter modern weapons and tactics, had no answer for attacks that combined centuries of naval warfare experience with space-age technology. Signal from Admiral Jin Ho, the communications officer announced. All ships to execute final victory protocol. Sun Mi nodded. Launch all remaining aircraft. Target their engines and retreat vectors. The last of her fighters joined the battle as the Misery's guns thundered one final time. High Lord Ko's flagship, its shields failing and its hull breached in multiple places, made an emergency jump to FTL, abandoning its escorts to their fate. The remaining Imperial ships, realizing their command had fled, began retreating in disorder. Some managed to escape into FTL, while others fell to the combined fire of Earth's historical fleet. The space around Jupiter, which had seen humanity's first major space battle, now witnessed its first major victory. Stand down, alert fighters, Sun Mi ordered as the last Imperial ship disappeared. Begin recovery operations. Her deck crews, wearing space suits that somehow managed to incorporate elements of traditional naval uniforms, prepared to recover the fighters that had helped win this unprecedented victory. As the Enterprise maneuvered to rejoin the main fleet, Sun Mi took a moment to appreciate the significance of what had just happened. The Empire had come expecting to find a primitive civilization ready to submit to their demands. Instead, they found that humanity's past was just as dangerous as its present, perhaps even more so, because it was completely unexpected. The carrier's deck was soon busy with returning fighters, their propellers still spinning inside their energy fields as they landed just as their predecessors had done on Earth's oceans. Each one was a perfect blend of old and new technology, a symbol of humanity's ability to adapt its history to face new challenges. The battle was over. Humanity had won its first major space battle, not with superior technology, but by combining its rich naval heritage with modern innovations in ways the Empire had never imagined possible. As Sun Mi watched the last of her fighters land, she knew that the galaxy would never look at Earth the same way again. The United Earth Council chamber was silent as Admiral Jin Ho finished his report. Humanity's victory had come not from superior technology, but from preserving their history and adapting it in ways the Empire never imagined. The holographic displays showed recordings of the battle, wooden ships firing broadsides in space, World War I fighters engaging Imperial vessels, submarines performing FTL ambushes. The Empire has withdrawn their demand for tribute, he concluded. More importantly, they've spread word about our primitive fleet. No one else will threaten Earth anytime soon. His weathered face showed pride as he gestured to the footage of the U.S. Missouri leading the final assault, her ancient guns proving as effective in space as they had been on Earth's oceans. Lena smiled. Sometimes the best way forward is to remember where we came from. She stood up from her council seat, looking at the assembled leaders of Earth. This victory belongs not just to our current generation, but to every sailor, pilot, and submarine commander whose tactics we used. In the Kuiper Belt Museum, a new wing was being constructed, one that would tell the story of how humanity's past had saved its future. Chief Curator Hanbin walked through the partially completed exhibits, making notes on his tablet. Around him, workers installed displays showing how each class of historical vessel had been modified for space combat. The British section is nearly complete, his assistant reported, pointing to a display featuring HMS Victory. The ancient ship of the line had accounted for 3 Imperial vessels during the battle, its broadside tactics proving surprisingly effective against modern shields. Hanbin nodded approvingly. Make sure we include Captain Park's battle footage. The public should see how we combined old and new technologies. The display showed how the Victory's wooden hull had been treated with space-age polymers while maintaining its original appearance. In another section, engineers were installing a full-scale cutaway model of a World War I submarine. Visitors would be able to see how modern FTL drives had been integrated into the original diesel-electric design, and how the torpedo tubes had been modified to launch both traditional and modern weapons. Commander Sunmi's carrier group footage is ready for review, and technician called out. The holographic display sprang to life, showing waves of propeller-driven fighters engaging Imperial ships. The sight of Corsairs and Wildcats flying combat missions in space had become one of the most iconic images of the battle. Back in the council chamber, Admiral Jinho was concluding his recommendations. We should continue the preservation program, he advised. The Empire won't be the last advanced civilization we encounter, and our historical fleet gives us an advantage they can't counter. Councillor Park, who had initially opposed the program's cost, stood up. I move that we increase funding for the historical fleet, he announced, and that we begin sharing this technology with all nations that contributed vessels to our victory. The vote was unanimous. Around the world, nations began preparing their own historical vessels for space adaptation. The British Royal Navy launched a program to restore more ships of the line. The Japanese Maritime Self-Defense Force began converting their preserved World War II vessels. The German Navy started adapting U-boat tactics for space warfare.